One of the big topics that's been discussed over the course of the semester in economics was monopolies. The game might be what comes to mind first when someone says monopoly, but in this case, economic monopolies are more sinister and need to be looked at more closely. In order to be considered a monopoly under U.S. law, you need to have a market share of more than 50%. Other characteristics of monopolies are high or unattainable barriers of entry, making it difficult for other firms to enter a market. Monopoly markets are also single sellers, so the firm in question essentially is the industry that it is a part of. Monopolies are also price makers and have total control over their prices because they don't have competition that can compete with them and offer an alternative. Another characteristic is economies of scale, meaning that large companies can produce at a lower cost because they have the resources to produce their product at a high volume. This is something small firms can't do because they don't have the capital that is needed to do so. Many companies that are a part of our everyday lives have been or are being questioned about whether or not they fit those criteria. Here are some examples.
AT&T is the most significant monopoly breakup in U.S. history. AT&T was a government-supported monopoly that had effective control over the country's telecommunications for decades. They were challenged by antitrust laws, and following 8 years in court in 1982, they were broken up by the federal government into 7 independent companies. Google is one of the huge companies that is currently facing scrutiny over their business practices as well. Google, as of 2018, had well over a 50% piece of the U.S. search market share and also has a 37% share of the total U.S. digital ad market, which has been brought under further scrutiny because of how they might use the data that they have. Facebook is another example of a large company entering an antitrust battle with the government over their right to control so much of the social media market. In recent years especially, Facebook, similar to Google, has been scrutinized for their misuse of the private information of their users and has a 22% share of the U.S. digital ad market. Amazon is also under an antitrust investigation with the European Commission over their control of the e-commerce marketplace. In the U.S., they are also being reviewed by the Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission over whether or not they have an unfair influence over the e-commerce market. While monopolies are generally viewed as a detriment to a diverse economy, there are some that are naturally occurring. This exists when the specific industry in question has high startup costs, or if a certain geographic location only has access to a limited amount of service providers. An example of natural monopolies is public transportation. Using Washington, D.C. as an example, the Metro has a monopoly on trains and buses in the city, but it also is impractical to have multiple companies running trains and buses because of the money that is needed, not to mention the logistical issues. Monopolies are something that are inevitable, and no matter how hard governments may try to regulate them, they will always exist. Instead of trying to completely eliminate them, it's important that governing bodies make sure to regulate them and maintain a level playing field across all economic markets when it's possible. If not, the consequences can be severe for both the economy and for the day-to-day lives of people who rely on those goods.